This is the Community Builder Podcast, Episode 4. Hello, I'm your host, Travis King. Coming up on this episode, I sit down with Richard Mulholland. Richard is an entrepreneur, guest speaker, blogger, and author of Legacide. Richard kicked off his career as a rock and roll roadie, operating lights for bands such as Iron Maiden, Leppard and Cliff Richard. From there, he started South Africa's largest presentation for Missing Link and co-founded Innovation Lab, 21 Tanks, and digital agency Firing Squad. Today, Richard can be found changing the world's relationship with presentations, 10 minutes at a time at Talk Tour. Let's get into the show. I would love to start off by kind of introducing the audience to you, and because I had a little bit of trouble at first, to be honest, because I was like, what does Richard like to be called? Is it a speaker? Do you like to be known as a co-founder, entrepreneur? Because I saw you had a lot of just fun things that you've worked on. So I'm like, what does Richard like to be called?
So the funny thing is that I often, if you see my Twitter bio, I'm just me, right? And I understand that I certainly don't want to be just a business person. I don't want to be just a speaker. I also find things like speaker, author, and entrepreneur, they're all the same. They're all the same thing, right? I learn stuff in my business. I write about it, then I speak about it, and it's all the same stuff. So I try to steer away, but I've certainly, founded a few businesses. I speak a lot. I have written a few books. I write a bunch of columns. I guess I fit somewhere in the context of your typical entrepreneur.
Okay. So no, that's completely fair. And it's also bad that I actually try to put you in, I literally try to put you in a category because that's what I'm so used to.
Well, but I guess that's helpful, right?
Yeah.
No, for sure. So I'm very suspicious of people who call themselves a speaker because I think, well, what are you actually doing? Where are you drawing? That's not a job. You speak about stuff that you figured out because of your job. So I've got a friend who's a polar explorer, but he makes much more of his money speaking. But he doesn't call himself a speaker. Speaking is a byproduct of being a polar explorer. I learned something in my business in one day that I speak about the next day that somebody else can apply in their business the day after that. And that to me is that speaking is a byproduct. Writing is a byproduct. Now, I do get a difference. Malcolm Gladwell is a writer, but he also speaks. But I'm also aware that even within the context of business, business is what I do now, but it's certainly not what I hope to be defined by.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that is very important. And could you touch on some of the things that you would like people to remember? I know you wrote the book Legacide, which would you mind filling people in a little bit about kind of why you wrote that and talk a little bit about what you want to be more remembered as and not just just touch
Absolutely.
On the legacy a little bit.
As I said, we can go anywhere. You just, if I'm rambling, you just cut me off.
So could you tell us a little bit about Legacide, what your thinking was behind that and kind of how that touches on you wanting to, leave behind more of yourself to the world?
So what happened is one of the businesses we ran was an innovation consultancy called 21 Tanks. And in it, I was hoping to be like an IDEO. We wanted to recreate the next iPhone and be hired to develop this big innovative thing. And, we were really, really excited about the cool stuff we were going to create. The problem was, or not the problem, the luck we had was that all of our clients were large corporations. So these big corporations would hire us, and we were excited because they had big budgets and money and the wherewithal to do really, really cool things. And then they would hire us. And first of all, the average person who walked in the door wasn't doing something earth-shattering. It was really, really big in their universe, but it wasn't big in the universe. It's rolling out some new thing for one subset of the clients at a really major bank. And we would come up with these concepts, and we would start brainstorming what the world would look like, and invariably they weren't able to do it. And slowly but surely, we realized that there was a problem that was consistent across the world. And this is almost always universally true with large corporations or with established businesses. And it was this premise that in an established business, innovation doesn't happen when you start doing something new. Innovation happens when you stop doing something old. And the thing that was killing off innovation was being right before. So we were correct up to this point, therefore we assume we'll be correct in this thinking going forward. And our entire job became not about turning on new switches, but about holding their hand through turning off old ones. And the book Legacide is built around that legacy thinking is the silent killer of innovation. That we often try and build off the successes of the past, when in fact we need to understand that we're starting a kind of some degree of a clean slate at any given time. And this is becoming increasingly truer as progress goes on.
Awesome. Yeah, I actually found that super interesting because a lot of times, and I love that the quote also, the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read, write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn, from Alvin Toffler. And I think that's so important because now more than ever, we have access to so many tools and resources and people to where we can learn at the snap of a dime. And if we can't unlearn, it's going to make it very difficult to innovate moving forward.
Right. And it's almost impossible to unlearn by yourself. It's why our entire methodology, we called it a perspective lab, is we realized that any group of smart people struggling with an innovation-based problem, it was never because they weren't smart enough. It's always because they're too smart. And to quote my friend Howard Mann, it becomes very hard to read the label from inside the bottle. And our job was to turn around and say, hey, don't hire us because we know your business, hire us because we don't. And so we said that we have a methodology and a way of thinking about the world, and you have all the smart stuff you need. Because I think one of the problems, the typical way that they would solve this is they would go to another group of really, really smart consultants who also had a predefined lens of the world. And we were saying that hasn't worked for you, and that's not working for you because you have a problem of too much knowledge and you're trying to solve it with more knowledge. This is like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. And what we're bringing is something totally different to the mix. And it worked really well for us. But the funny side effect was the realization that the problem we set out to solve, or the solution we set out with to solve it, was completely wrong. We weren't going to solve the problem of these corporations by giving them new ideas. We're going to solve their problems by telling them which ones to stop doing. And that became our entire premise. What legacy thinking is in your business that's holding you back?
Got it. No, that's awesome. And in terms of like how you've implemented and practiced that, I guess, could you talk or tell maybe a story or two about, what it was like telling a company that they need to change how they're thinking in order to innovate?
One story came in that there was an organization who came to us and they had this really, really compelling product that they'd been selling a certain way for years and they had an accepted sales cycle of 6 months. And they were a really big business. They go to an IT firm, or they were an information business, and they were going to big corporations and they were selling a certain way. And they wanted to know how we could increase that. And they wanted to figure out, is there a way that they could scale better and potentially internationally? So the basic offering was that they go into an organization, like a really, really large one. Say one of the banks here has on average 40,000 employees. And they would go to them and say, listen, we figure out you're wasting a lot of money in your use of telephony and all your call centers and across the business. We're going to save you money in this business. And all we want to do is take a share of this. So you're already spending, let's say, $1 million. We're going to say to you, well, we'll cut that down to $500,000, and we just want half of what we save. Now, theoretically, this should be a completely compelling and easy sale. It's costing you nothing if we save you nothing. But what I couldn't get my head around is then why would the sales cycle be 6 months? Like, it didn't make any sense to me. So they were eventually getting them to say yes, but it was hard. Now, this is nonsensical. So we were trying to think what to do. So we put together a perspective lab and we brought in a Brains Trust member who was the head of one of the local commercial banks. So part of our business model said that if you hire us to do work, you're agreeing as part of your payment, we're subsidizing part of your payment, and you agree to sit in the lab of a future business, a future client of ours that is non-competitive. So we would have somebody from South African breweries, who was at one stage the largest brewery on the planet, sitting in a innovation lab for the Nokia. And then we'd have the Nokia person sitting in an innovation lab for a bank. And in this case, the banker was sitting in the innovation lab for the software firm. And so the banker's sitting there the whole time, and he's kind of going through this, and he's thinking, and you could see this rattling in his head. And eventually he turned around and he said, guys, but you've got this all wrong. He says, your entire value proposition is broken. And this client looked at them and he said, it's nobody in the bank's job to save money. Literally, nobody's KPI is save the bank money. So you're speaking a language, you're telling people something that they simply don't give a shit about. And he said, you need to understand, you're going and selling to the head of the call center and you're telling them you can save money. And there's simply that person's mandate. There's no place on their KPIs on their goals or anywhere where it says save money. What their job is to have a better call center or to reduce the amount of clients leaving or any of these things. And our realization was that we had to change the idea from saving money to unlock potential. So the methodology we came up with was we went to them and we turned around and said, what is the biggest problem facing your business right now? And they said, it's this, whatever it was. And we said, if we could unlock $500,000 right now, if we could provide you $500,000 of extra capital towards solving this problem, how would you use it tomorrow to make a difference? And they say, well, it might be something as simple as putting in this new CRM system we wanted, or upgrading the chairs in the call center, whatever it was. And then we said to them, well, what if we told you we could unlock that potential for you within the next month? And they said, well, that would be very compelling. We said, great. Well, this is how we're going to do it. And then they told them the offering. So it was no longer about saving money, which was what the premise the entire business had been built under. We can save money for businesses. It was now about we can unlock potential. And this might sound like a subtle thing, but we dropped their lead time down to 2 weeks from 6 months. So they were able to now close within 2 weeks. And it was just that little bit of outside perspective from the person saying, but we don't have a money saving problem. And often we're solving problems for customers that they just don't see as the problems, even if it seems so obvious to us. I mean, in today's terms, you might call that product market fit. But it's not just that, because the product and the market did fit, but the conversation
Right. I think that's wild in my head, because it's so funny how just a simple perspective change and just having, like you said, someone from a bank in a room with someone who's not from a bank. And I'm just very curious on how we can even take that and apply it to something like community building and think about what it's like to have, just an outside perspective looking in. Like, is that kind of a regular practice for you?
Almost the only way we do things. So it's very, very hard to learn anything from a bubble. I was just in Y Combinator startup school for a new business talk tour. And the one thing that I don't want to say frustrated me, but their entire universe and every lesson is based on other startup founders. And every single one of these startup founders, to some degree, now they may be quite a diverse group across gender and race and things like this, but for the most part, they'll look and sound and act like startup founders. They use the same language. They talk the same way. They dress the same way. And they felt like we were getting the same person in over and over and over again. And sometimes you learn more from people who are some degree of naive in your space, but experts in theirs. That's why, NASA wasn't going to be able to build the kind of rockets that the X Prize allowed people to build. Because NASA, they knew how to build rockets, and they just tried to make better versions of those. Whereas what you need is somebody who's somewhat naive in the problem you're trying to solve. Now, even within community building, probably the community I'm most involved in is the board game community. And it's a very active community, and it's really, really powerful. But I was listening to a lesson the other day, and it was based on how do we build better board game communities? And the answer was, we got to look what the knitting community does. So it turns out knitters are like one of the biggest communities in the planet. And they've solved certain things that we haven't solved. And so what was happening is we were looking at the insights in our smaller group and saying, well, who is the most successful in our group right now? And saying, well, how have they done that? And then trying to replicate that. But what we're doing is we're replicating the behaviors of the best people within the board game community instead of looking at other even more powerful communities and replicating the behavior of from them. And to me, that's what we have to be doing. It turns out in the knitting community, for example, it was how do people make the leap from being hobbyist knitters to people selling patterns online? And it turned out that massive leap happened when they joined a knitting group. So if they just existed in an online community, it wasn't enough to push them to go professional. But as soon as they joined a group of people that met, on a Thursday afternoon and they all knitted together, then when somebody saw their nice, unique pattern, they would say something like, oh, wow, that's phenomenal. That's amazing. You should totally sell that. And it was that little personal nudge. And it was the realization that the peer pressure of a real live community that you can touch and feel, that somebody's sitting in front of you, was like something like 95% more powerful than when that same push happened online. So it makes you realize, well, how do we replicate this? And we need to get our perspectives from places we weren't looking. Just looking at people who are in your industry doing it well is not enough. You got to look at people outside your industry and measure against them. I can give you one other example.
That would be awesome.
So one of our clients had a problem. It's a company called Bosch. It's the kitchen company.
Yep, dryers, all that stuff.
In that, yeah, for sure. That in this context here, they were the market leaders. And from a design point of view, they were so far ahead of their competitors that actually they didn't have anywhere else to look. So they were measuring themselves against the best in the market, which was them. And the realization was that they were not able to accelerate as fast as they could because it's quite hard to accelerate when you're not chasing. And so what we had to do when we worked with them is we had to chase the frame that instead of them being the best in kitchens, we had to frame where they were versus discretionary purchases in houses. Because we realized that nobody actually needs to have nobody in the world needs a $20,000 oven. You could probably buy a $500 oven or even cheaper. But yet, within their stable, they were selling these really, really expensive ones. And so we realized that they weren't competing against other kitchen appliance companies. They were actually competing against an art piece on a wall, or they were competing against, companies like Apple and high-end design. And so we had to reframe their entire business and stop having them look at their competition as what it was and try give them a new perspective on the space in which they fit and the category in which they fit. And that was the job. So you can always, by exiting your frame and putting yourself somewhere else, you have a whole new set of measurement criteria that I think becomes very powerful. But I apologize, I'm rambling now.
Oh, no, it's okay. No, I think that's super relevant because, again, when you're so focused, and it's funny because a lot of the communities that we find, especially in the US at least, are the tech communities. Those are the largest communities right now. And those are the ones that are spinning up, I'd say, the majority of innovation, at least from a technological standpoint goes. And these tech companies all are in the same boat, I feel like. They're all leading. You have the Amazons and the Googles of the world that are competing against each other. But again, when you're so far out and ahead of the competition, it's like, well, how does a Google or an Amazon or an Apple think, oh, wait, maybe we should look at a knitting community and repurpose our thinking? So I think that's a very good point.
Yes. And again, in many cases, it's easier to replicate some of these behaviors because a lot of times these other communities, if you look at the other people that build communities within Meetup, a lot of those people have done that self-organized. They've used you guys maybe as a platform, but they've self-organized and done it without money. Whereas we're trying to replicate these communities. And this is why, from a tech point of view, when we were in this Y Combinator startup school, we were looking at everything and we were thinking, where do we raise funding? What do we do? And we were kind of writing down all the notes of the way that all these businesses did that. And then I was like, but hold on a second, I'm a 44-year-old guy with 21 years of running my own business. Why would I possibly want to start everything from scratch again? Why would I not try and take the best of their ideas from stuff that I already knew and build on it from there? So we tried to look outside the tech community to build a better tech business. Now, obviously, the jury's out on whether that will work, but we certainly seem to be getting traction now.
Right. And then when you say getting traction, which specific venture or project are you talking about?
So one of our businesses, and the one that I'm full-time involved in at the moment, is called TalkDrawer. And when we knew it was a tech offering, so maybe a little bit of background. I started when I was in my very early 20s. I was a rock and roll roadie. So I did lighting for bands like Iron Maiden and Def Leppard and Bon Jovi. And in the off season, when you were touring in South Africa, you didn't have work. So I realized that I was able to go to big corporations and say to them, listen, your conferences are crappy. We can turn them into these we'll make you as the CEO look like a rock star. So I would sell them this lighting, sound, staging, and AV. And they got very excited about this and they bought it for their conference. And then they walked into this amazing spectacle of an extravaganza of a show. And then they stood up on the stage and they were crap. And I realized that you can't fix a bad steak with pretty garnish, right? You have to fix the steak itself. So I started a presentation company when I was 22, not because I thought that I loved presentations, but because I hated them so much, I felt that there was an opportunity to fix stuff there. And for years, that's what we built. So Missing Link, my company, is now 21 years old or just a bit older. And we work with companies all over the world and we help people present better. We develop the presentations, we write the presentation and conference strategies for them, And we try and activate audiences by doing those things well. But the problem was it was quite a hard business to scale. And then I realized that we live in a time now where I could take certain of the thinking and scale that through the TalkDraw offering that we've come up with, which I'll explain in a second. But we went onto the Y Combinator Startup School, and everything that they were kind of preaching, to some degree, assumed that we were starting from nothing. So I was looking at everything, building funding, building these things. And at some point, I can't remember who it was. It was one of the guys, Michael Seibel, I think. And it was kind of that realization that, well, or you could just go out and sell. And I realized for, 21 years, I've been dealing with the top executives in really, really big companies. And so we just started going out and selling. And instead of selling to end users to use our product, we started selling to corporations. So instead of selling a $25 per user per month contract, we've now just sold a $150,000 contract. And it didn't take any more work. It was just working on the back of the network and the community of business people I'd already built on. And so it was that kind of change in perspective for me that was necessary.
Got it. And that's so exciting, because I was looking at TalkDraw a little bit and just taking a quick look through, some of the different presentations you've worked on and projects. I feel like it's got to be something fun to work on.
Yeah. So the basic premise of TalkDraw is that imagine, say, Netflix, Blinkist, and PowerPoint met in a club, and they got a little bit drunk, and then they went home, and then 9 months later they had a baby. That's what we would be. So we turn content, smart content, like a business book, into presentable information for business leaders. We work under the belief that the difference between a leader and a manager is their ability to communicate. But writing presentations is hard. So we're saying, well, what happens if we did that heavy lifting for you? What if we distilled the core concepts into a pre-created, coached presentation deck that you could go on a Sunday evening, you could spend an hour with, and the following morning you could present with the skill of a professional speaker? And that's exactly what we do. And we've proven it. It works time and again, like it does exactly what it says in the box. You will do some rehearsals, and the next day you will stand in front of your team and you will present with the skill of a professional speaker. And we will increase that level of skill over and over and over again as you repeat it. Because the realization in the years that I've written or owned Missing Link, a presentation company, and the premise of the new book I wrote, Boredom Slayer, is that you write a good presentation before you deliver it. People think presenting is about having speaking skills. Turns out we can all speak. Most of us are capable of holding a good conversation. What we're not good at is writing. And what we've done is we've said, well, we'll take the content you want to communicate and we will write that for you, and you will stand up and deliver that to your team, and you will nuance that and make it your own in your delivery in such a way that you're able to make it feel like your own presentation and get your team's own response and customize the whole thing for them without changing a single slide. It's Netflix for presentation days.
Wow. And so like, does it work off of it sounds like it works off of a framework that you put people can use this framework and then they apply their own little personalization to each presentation. Is that how it usually goes?
Yeah. So personalization, as a speaker, if you see me talk, depending on who I'm speaking to, I'll often change what I'm saying in real time in the moment. The slide is supposed to be a miniature sandbox. Each visual aid's got a job of getting across a core point. The story that I deliver in that in that sandbox is often changed as per the audience or the amount of time I have or what I'm doing, and we try and train people to do that. So we'll put the basic building blocks of the presentation together, and all the slides are there, and that will remain consistent behind you. In fact, one of the things we've intentionally not done is allow you to edit anything that's behind you. What we do give you is freedom within a frame, right? So we give you a frame freedom that says, within the confines of this narrative structure, you can take the presentation wherever you need it to go. And we coach you, and we actually, each single presentation, we try and encourage you to focus on a different part of your speaking. It might be your hand gestures. It might be your pausing. It might be how you build up your voice and when you bring it down. But we only let you focus on one of these things each presentation. And the rest of that talk, we want you to deliver in order to get a response from your teams. And our core offering started off as being, I'm a member of the EO Entrepreneur Organization. It's a community of 13,000 entrepreneurs around the world. And at first I thought, well, I want to build a tool for them, for people like me who can stand up and, stand in front of my team and deliver a presentation. And we have that offering in place. But the realization for us is the real opportunity existed in going to companies with teams all over the world and delivering global company information through the mouths of local company leaders. So now somebody at a head office wants to make a cultural change in their business. The current way they do that is they record it on a video and they distribute that video everywhere and they expect people to watch it. But we know that's not how people engage. And it disintermediates leadership at a ground level. So what we do is we say, no, we're going to take it one little step before that. And we're going to do all of that up to the point of the leader. And then the leader of that team is going to stand up and deliver a message. And so they're creating these micro little communities, micro levels of leader-led teams, rather than just being these kind of disintermediated managers.
Yeah, that's so important. And decentralization is like another huge theme that has allowed some of these other, corporations to scale so fast and so strong. It's like having this, team outside of the office and team in these local areas that allow, these companies to have such a large footprint, but also adapt to the needs of their local communities. Like a community in Australia is different than one in New York. That's different than one in Europe. So definitely think that's so important. And it's great that you created such a useful tool for these people to use.
Yeah, because we believe wholeheartedly in that, but we believe it comes with a loss. It becomes with a loss of some feeling of being led day to day, and we want to bring that back. So we want to make it easy for, as I said, that global company information to be delivered through the mouths of those local leaders.
Got it. And it's funny, too, because that's one of the things that we actually do help clients with a lot here at Meetup is actually helping them find local leaders on the ground. Our platform's been, very well suited to help identify these people. So it's definitely nice to hear that someone else also sees value in, finding local leaders, promoting that message, but then also just instilling trust back into the community, because it's way easier to build trust on the ground than it is to build it outside. And I think from that same presentation that I watched, it was, I don't know I can't remember exactly the quote, but it was something along the lines of, if you're trying to fix the country of Africa, like you have to fix it with someone who's from that country. Is that?
Kofi Annan, the recently deceased head of the UN, he said Africa's problems can only be solved by Africans. I think that might be the quote you're referring to. I think I did that talk like 8 years ago. But
yeah, but definitely.
It really, really can, right? And it's also this idea of there's just a completely different frame. And it's always easier, and to some degree, and I guess this goes against the idea of perspective, but it is very, very hard for you to solve African problems if you don't understand the problems in the context of being an African. However, within that framework, you would still need to have people outside trying to think of new ways to do things. Because a person who solved a postal problem in the United States, say an e-commerce company in the United States, you could come up with something and say, this is amazing, and this is exactly what we should do. And we just have, posted parcels to them, every day. But, I can't receive post from the United States. If I want to get post from the United States, I send it to a Florida-based drop shipping facility, and then I pay to courier it to South Africa, because I understand that if there's anything of even vague value that exists, it's going to be stolen before it gets to me. So you couldn't arrive here with a frame. That's why for years, Amazon actually stopped shipping to South Africa, because it simply required them changing the way they operated too much in order to guarantee the same level of service. Whereas Takealot came here, it's the kind of South African version of Amazon, and said, well, we understand the constraints of operating here, and we're going to build our business with that mindset going in. And so that's why that organization has managed to build a massive, we've got our own version of Amazon here that everybody uses, because they understood the context in which they existed. Now I think it's time. Now Amazon will come in and disrupt, because that heavy lifting has been done for them.
Right, which makes practical business sense. But that's also very crazy to think that there's another, there are other worlds all over the place that, are completely different from ours.
For sure. But it also is it's smart for Amazon to behave that way. I did a new TEDx talk a few weeks ago in Cape Town, and I spoke about this idea that it's the lie of the first mover advantage, as we're all taught this power of being first and, this first mover advantage, but actually it's generally a first mover disadvantage. In fact, the real advantage comes for the fast fixer, the person who can look at something that was built already and say, I can fix that. I like what they've done, but it could be better and I can fix it. Because you're not doing any of the work. And just as that person, they've built their version of something and they've done all of this work and they've spent years deving something and building something up there and they've just finished their marathon. At that point, you can start your sprint. And that's what Amazon can do here. They can walk in and say, well, we've left Takealot to build everything, to get it all in place. We can look at how they've done it and we can just come in and deploy. And I think there's a lot more power in being a fast fixer than there is in being a first mover.
Yeah, I love that. I couldn't agree with you anymore. And there's another quote. I wish I had. I wish I could find more picture perfect quotes. But one thing that I think you said was the best and only way to uplift a community is to educate and empower the community to do it themselves. Let them tear down the walls. I guess could you talk a little bit about that and what sorts of things that you've done in the past to help people do this?
Well, that particular example came from the tearing down of the Berlin Wall. And it was the idea that when the Berlin Wall came down, it wasn't a, legislation that was passed and somebody said you have permission. It was a completely community, eventually the community, it kind of was a groundswell that started, a month before in Leipzig. And then it was the community that ended up moving and literally walking up to the wall and tearing it down. And you have to do your best to create that kind of groundswell and allow the people, and this was specifically written for large organizations. The organizations try to lead from the top and they try to create this cultural change at a strategic level. But actually, we use the word strategy incorrectly. The new book I'm writing is called The Death of Strategy. And it basically says that in today's day and age, a lot of what we're thinking is actually tactical. A lot of what we're calling strategy is tactical. It's a tactic that is deployed by a group of people at the ground level, because that's where a lot of meaningful change happens. And if we go in understanding that, then in fact, it changes the relationship with big thinking and says, well, all we need to do is to define a strategic destination, the right place this business needs to be at a fixed period of time. I refer to this as a victory condition. So what is the victory condition of this organization over a fixed period of time? Communicate that, and then give a framed freedom. So that is allow people to move within a certain frame and say, insofar as you're going to get us here by that time within this frame, you can do whatever you want and be tactical. And this is the idea of saying you're creating this group of people with a shared destination and saying, just get there. Get there within, the legal confines of the culture or values or whatever the organization is. And we see this working so much better and it's so much more effective. It allows your people to feel that they have some degree of autonomy, but all that autonomy is just drive as fuel or is manifest as fuel to drive the organization towards a target. So you're not saying to people, here's the strategy, do it. You're saying, here's the place, get us there. And provided they buy into that and they agree with that destination and that's your job, then they will, work nights and weekends trying to make that happen. So all you have to do is give them a reason to believe.
Give them a reason to believe. No, that makes so much sense. I think it's so important to, and especially just being someone that's been on so many different teams. It's like when you get told certain things, like you get told what to do. No one really likes being told what to do, at least not that many people I know. And so when you empower people, it definitely does give that, more sense of belief, belonging, and it gives people to trust you more. So I definitely love where you went with that.
So let's say you were somehow put onto our team at TalkCore. Now, funny enough, I guess the coincidence is when we first came up with the idea, it was originally called POW, and it was a year and a half ago on a snowboarding trip. We came up with this idea, and at the very, very beginning, we spoke about Meetup being a service that we were going to use because we realized that one of the ways to roll this out had to be that we wanted to have, and we called them Thursday night sessions, where we wanted to be a competitor to an organization like Toastmasters. And we wanted people to self-organize in groups where they knew what presentation they would be doing the next day and have these kind of Prezzo jam sessions where they'd be able to self-critique each other and do these things. And let's say I say to you that I still wanted that to be the case. And for whatever reason, Meetup had decided to partner with us. And they said, okay, they can get behind this. They want leaders meeting all over the world, having these meetups and Prezzo jamming together for the talks that they were going to be doing the next week. My job would not to be to tell you and the team at Meetup what it was we needed. My job, and I believe as a leader, would be to say, this is the vision we have. I believe that I can change the world's relationship with presentation. And I believe if we can change the way people present meaningful ideas, we can change the way the world turns. right? Because there have been so many amazing ideas that have been so poorly presented that they're dying on cutting room floors. Now, let's say I can get a small team of people that meets up behind this and to believe in our vision and our goal, and to say our strategic destination is within a year from now. We want to have people self-organizing, groups of entrepreneurs to do these presentations one night a week, wherever that in 50 cities around the world. And let's say you guys all agreed. The moment I get you to agree, I can step away. And let's say we had a weekly update meeting. I don't have to tell you what to do ever. I don't have to check anything. I simply have to check that you feel that you're progressing towards the victory condition. And even if the world changed and your software changed and everything changed, you would constantly just be able to self-adjust, because you're always saying, based on the world as it looks today and the condition of victory that we share, how would we best get there? And that would be the job. And that's what we need. And that's how we would roll out and create a groundswell within a large organization to get meaningful change. And I think it's a lot more powerful than telling people what to do.
Yeah, it's super interesting. And I'm just thinking, like, when you're doing it in like a country specifically, I'm just thinking like the US, because you brought it up a little bit. Like, how are there like, would you connect the leaders from, per se, like someone in New York, in California, and then kind of get them on the same page and understand the direction of the overall organization? Like, how do you get those 50 leaders like on the same page? Is it just with the belief and vision?
Yeah. So one the way we currently do it, and so let's say we'll go and we'll sit with just the 10 people in an organization to define the victory condition. So we don't need everybody to define it. We need, organizations are still led from the top for the most part. They're not all holocratic. And so you'll have, let's say, these guys in New York City, and they will define what that victory condition is. And then we realized that one of the biggest problems is that people were communicating the wrong stuff. They were communicating the government information to their staff instead of the citizen information to their staff. So what we always do when we work with teams is we say, okay, cool. Step one of your strategy session is to define the strategic destination. And step two is to figure out what is the most meaningful way to communicate that to people. Now, often you can communicate the victory condition in absence of actually giving the full strategy. In fact, often that works better because it changes contextually depending on who you're speaking to. Let's say in San Francisco was your dev team. They wouldn't need to know everything that was happening with regards to marketing. But maybe when you're speaking in Boston, it's your marketing team and you would want to communicate different information there. So we worked out, well, how do we communicate that most effectively around the organization, that all the different elements know what they have to do, but they don't have to care what the other teams are doing. Because it turns out we don't have to fly in formation. This idea of teamwork and cooperation, feeling like we have to fly in formation, is incorrect. We don't have to fly in formation. We just have to fly to the same place at the same time. We're just going to get there together. And that's all we communicate. And we'll work out and we make it as easy, and we strip away all the information that's superfluous to getting that victory condition made real for you. And then the individual teams will take to it. They can ask if they don't understand, and they can certainly ask if they need more information. But generally, we started giving them the littlest amount of information possible to allow getting their perspective into how do we best get to the goal. We just got to tell them why we think it's important, or where we need them to be by when, and why we think this is important. Once they've checked off their own internal boxes around how that would look, then it's entirely up to them just to go out and make it happen. And incidentally, a tool like TalkDrawer that we've created, we believe is a perfect vehicle for delivering that victory condition to the different teams around an organization, and then let them give the change back or make the change happen.
Got it. So just if I'm summing this up, just to make sure I get it, and if this is if what I think this is what it is, then I'm super impressed and very happy that you've distilled it down to such simple terms. So it sounds like TalkDrawer is kind of like this mechanism that you use to help these companies or organizations find, a greater mission. And once you put this mechanism in front of them, they can use it to, be understood in their own, point of views. And then they can also collectively use it to kind of get them to their destination.
For sure. But the easiest way, bear in mind, that is if they take the full load from us. That's one way that you could use TalkDrawer. But if you're a leader and you're struggling with a team that doesn't seem to understand the importance of attention to detail, you can just log on and present a presentation on attention to detail and never come back again. for all intents and purposes, you can use it for the big way that we would love you to use it, which is as a strategic partner to your organization. And certainly with the companies we're speaking to now and the first few customers that have signed up, that's what we're doing. But we would like any leader in any team anywhere in the world who really is frustrated about something. They want to talk to their team because they think their team is unremarkable, or because they think that the team isn't able to properly explain the value that they're delivering to their customers. And we have presentations for that. They must log on, they must search for the problem they want to solve, they must present that information to their team the next day for 15 to 20 minutes, and then start creating a measurable change in their companies. So we want to be massively strategic, but we also want to be rapidly tactical. If you just want to solve a problem, you log on, you find the talk that will change your business in the right way, and you present that.
Well, I also want to be conscious of time because I know that we had scheduled out till 9:20. And it's 9:25, at least my time. I didn't want to hold you over, but I also wanted to make sure if there's something that we didn't touch on that you wanted to talk about, because I know when we first started, you were interested in talking a little bit about networking and communities. So I wanted to also give you a chance to ask me any questions or figure out what else you want to talk about.
One question I would ask you is, how does an online business, when you create something, when you have a group of people that are on the same path but separately, in your experience, how do you get people to realize that if they could come together in a physical space and just meet up and share their ideas, that it would have a better chance of survival, or that they would become better? How do you get people to self-organize, and how do you plant that seed in the first place that this is what they should be doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so one of my actual previous guests, Cecil Phillip, said something great. And it was that when he was getting started, he just needed somebody to talk to. And he, realized he's like, man, I created this awesome thing in my room. In his eyes, it's like this pot of gold, and he just needs somebody to share it with. And so what he did is he started just joining different communities, and he started going to just these places where he could just talk about technology, what he's building, and learn about what other people are building. And he said that one of the important things was actually having somebody ask him to present at one of these, local meetups, one of these local events. And he said, yeah, I'd be happy to, but he's like, I'm going to need 3 to 6 months for a presentation. And so it was wait, 3 to 6 months, it's something that's, to him, he wasn't technically a subject matter expert yet. And so it was kind of that hurdle of, I don't 100% feel comfortable, but I'm going to do it because someone asked me to, from the community. And so I'm going to try at least. And so one thing I've noticed that happens often is that there are these people that are in communities that see talent, right? It's kind of hard to scale in a way, but they see talent and they ask them, hey, do you want to present? Do you want to do a talk? Do you want to ask questions? And so one, just creating a culture where the leaders actually give people the chance to actually, present and level up and, do different things. That's kind of one way I've seen it work. I'm trying to think of another way. And another way is just small peer groups. So another guest that I had on, his name is Gary, and he runs this community called Orbital. And it's a community of practice for different project managers, product managers in New York City. And they get together and talk about everything product. And, there's a whole bunch of different, workspaces with different, studios that, they can go to. And it's a place where they go and build their networks. And so he has these, sessions to where he brings together all these different product managers, and they just talk about what they're going through, problems they're facing, challenges they've have, current things that they're working on. And it's just, a peer-to-peer network share. And so that's kind of another example I've seen where just in the nature of Orbital being a community for products and, project managers, that is just by the nature of what Gary created. And so people go and learn from one another, and that kind of just happens organically. So I hope that answers it, but it is a little tricky to kind of instill that and drive people forward.
Yeah, for sure. But it certainly plants the seed. So thank you.
Definitely. Of course. Well, Rich, this has been so fun. Really appreciate you, hopping on. And if for anyone that wants to either stay connected, connect with you, reach out, learn more about TalkDrawer, what would be the best way to get in contact with you?
Well, if they want to get involved with TalkDrawer, we'd love them to try it out. Go and test the deck. There's a deck there that's free. You can just put in an email address and get started straight away. You can go to talkdrawer.com for that. That's TALK and drawer, like you put stuff in. And then if they'd like to engage with me, I'm at Rich Mulholland on Twitter and Instagram. And in the link, the bio link is a Linktree link that links to everywhere else. My Facebook, my newsletter, my video series, all of those things. So awesome. In the bio on Twitter is probably the best place to look to get all the information.
Yep. And I won't give it away because there are some exciting things in here. So I'll let people come across those when they get to your Twitter.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Travis. I really appreciate it. It's been great chatting.
Of course, it's been great. And I also want to just open the floor if there's anything that you are working on that we might be able to partner on or help with, because I guess a little context in a meetup real quick. We got acquired by WeWork last year. And I've been working on the enterprise side to figure out how companies can work with, meetup, and also how we can just help the enterprises and communities would innovate and do whatever they need to. And so if there's any ways that you think that I potentially could help you with TalkDrawer, or if there's ways that, enterprise companies could value either working together or anything, just thoughts, don't hesitate to reach out because I'm always open to talk about that stuff.
Thanks. I will absolutely be doing that. Maybe early in the new year, we jump on a call and take it from there. That'd be great.
Awesome. That sounds like a plan to me.
Thanks, dude.
Thanks so much, Rich. Thanks a lot. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, evening.
Yeah.
We'll chat soon. Thanks for listening to the Community Builder Podcast with your host, Travis King. If you like the show and want to know more, check us out on our website, communitybuildershow.com, or feel free to leave me a review on iTunes. Join me next week when I sit down with Kevin Huynh.